It's just a wonderful privilege to welcome as our commencement speaker, Cory Booker. Cory's an extraordinarily inspiring visionary whose life's been consumed by a passion for social justice. Nathan and I were commenting just before the commencement that we today succeeded where Lou Holtz failed, and that is we succeeded in getting Cory Booker into a Notre Dame uniform today. Last time Cory was here, I think he raised havoc on our football field, and I'm glad we have him confined to the Mendoza School of Business today. Cory was raised in Harrington Park, New Jersey, and he moved west to attend Stanford, where he served as a tight end of the football team, president of the student body. He studied history at Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar before earning his law degree from Yale University, where he founded and directed legal clinics for low-income residents of New Haven. Cory carried a bold political agenda back to his native New Jersey, where he defeated a 16-year incumbent to serve as Newark's Central Ward councilman. And I'll leave it to your imagination as to what that might entail. During his 4 years as councilman, Booker introduced more than 100 pieces of legislation, including laws mandating companies in Newark to give preference in hiring to city residents and resolutions to enforce housing codes. Cory's become known for truly living out his politics in unconventional and creative ways. As a bold community activist, he offers the ultimate model of social reform by participating in complete solidarity with his fellow residents in Newark, living in the projects, empowering others to believe in their collective ability to break down barriers of all sorts and work for change. So please join me in welcoming Cory Booker, formerly of Stanford University's football team, as our commencement speaker.
That is a great introduction and puts his finger on one of the two reasons I have been so excited to be here. And the first reason, obviously, is the last time I was at this campus, I was dressed in a Stanford uniform, and I had Tyrone Willingham on my side. And I come back humbly to you now in a Notre Dame uniform to beseech you to please give him back. But the other reason, and maybe the more poignant and powerful reason that I'm here and humbled to be here and truly touched to have been asked to participate, really more deals with the graduates. I have to be very frank with you. I give a number of speeches this time of year to graduating classes from university, graduate schools, as well as undergraduate. But this invitation touched me more than any other one I've received, for the simple fact that the other people I talk to, the majority of them are going out to create finite things in a material world, to produce, to manufacture. But today I get to share my heart and spirit with people who are entering the realm of the infinite, who are casting out into the universe their love, which will give and give and give to others and continue to expand even after we all have passed this earth. I salute you all as teachers, and I thank you because you give me a gift today. You inspire me because I have chosen a difficult path and I need inspiration. You encourage me because I am in an environment that so often daunts my spirit. And you give me the most precious gift of all is you give me hope. So I thank you. And on that humble note, I must also confess to you that as I read more about the program you have completed and the individuals that you are, I came to feel that I am unequipped to give you a truly inspiring message. For you all probably have as much wisdom to share with me as I have with you. But if you allow me to fall back and rely, therefore, upon two people far more wise and sagacious than I am, to steal from them perhaps one or two kernels of wisdom to share with you. The first person I'd like to talk to you about is my grandfather. My grandfather is probably one of the more crazy people I have ever met in my life. And I say that with sincere affection and with the realization that the true people that make differences in this world are those people who are a little bit crazy and are a little bit willing to think creatively about their circumstances. My grandfather was born dirt poor to a single mother back at the turn of the century. And he came to every single one of my graduations. Him, not a man of many letters, him a man who worked with his hands all of his life. He came to every one of my graduations and would always meet me in the way he did often, with telling me the same stories over and over and over again. He was a man of incredible sense of humor, even though he told the same jokes over and over and over again. When I was a little boy, if we were traveling cross country and I asked him a historical fact which he had no knowledge of, he would make up an answer. We were driving through Yuma, Arizona. I said, "Granddad, why do they call this Yuma, Arizona?" He goes, "Well, that's easy. There was a gunfight many, many years back. One man shot the other, and he grabbed his heart and said, 'Yuma,' and fell over." There. He tells a story about his one-room classroom, which I think is apocryphal, but he tells it over and over again, about him being in this classroom and a teacher who did not know that much about teaching and decided that she, on her first day, was going to tell the class and teach them a lesson about self-esteem. And she stood before the class and she said, "Class, I want to teach you all about self-esteem. Anybody in this classroom thinks you're stupid, I want you to stand up right now." And none of the kids moved, and she repeated himself, "Come on now, you think you're stupid, you think you're dumb, stand up." And my grandfather, sitting in the back of the room, finally pushed his chair back and stood up and looked at the teacher standing there, and she goes, Mr. Jordan, what's wrong with you, boy? You think you're dumb, you think you're stupid?" And my grandfather said, he said to her, "Ma'am, shucks, I don't think I'm stupid, but I didn't want you to be the only one standing." So I give you my grandfather's graduation words. He would always come up to me, whether I graduated from 8th grade or Yale Law School, whether it was Oxford University or Stanford undergrad, and he would do the same thing. He would come over to me and grab me by the elbow and squeeze hard with his fat, pudgy hands and look me in the eye and say his first joke, which I know quite well. He'd say, "You see, boy, the tassel is worth the hassle." And then after one other joke or two, he would get to the serious thing that he said over and over and over. The first thing he'd say is, "Boy, I want you to know something. You can learn more from a woman on the 6th floor of the projects than you ever can from one of these fancy professors. Always remember that." It was this idea to him that the humblest of folk on earth are truly the wisest and have the most to offer. Then he would squeeze a little bit harder and he would say to me, "Please never forget that the degree you hold now was paid for by the blood, sweat, and tears of your ancestors. And therefore you must and have an obligation to continue that struggle so that those that come after you have the same opportunity." But then he would say his last word to me. And on my last graduation, after him attending 7 of my graduations from Yale Law School, he looked at me and said, "Son, I don't have great aspirations for you. I just want you to promise me, just promise me one thing. You will always be a stand-up guy." And I looked at him when he said this to me the last time, and I tried to smile, and tears started rolling down my eyes, maybe in part because I knew it was my last graduation, but also because he reminded me of someone. And I'd like to make that the second person I tell you about. My grandfather, who passed away last year, really laid the pavement for me to truly grasp the lesson that I understood in this next person, who really accentuated what my grandfather said. And this woman's name is Gussie Goforth, and she had the ignominious distinction of being the first person I ever represented as a lawyer. And I was sent to her offices, to her home rather, from my law office, and I went to her door and I had to crunch over crack vials to get to her door in this public housing project. And I knocked on her door, and as she opened the door, she had a face that I had to try to compose myself in politeness not to react to. She had a face that was worn with deep, deep wrinkles. It was a sign of an age of long ago. And she had jagged scars on her face. And it looked like altogether an old map of a place I would never want to go to or even know about. She was severely hunched over and had her tongue all swollen, and she spoke with a lisp through broken teeth. And she invited me to come into an apartment that had barely anything of noteworthiness in it except for a fragile old couch that barely supported my weight, and the armchair she sat in with a small table next to it with a Bible that was thick and old that looked like it had been worn over for generations. She explained to me that she was being evicted from her housing. She explained to me that she was being evicted because of a draconian rule that many public housing authorities have that says if one person in a family is caught with drugs, then the entire family is evicted. Well, this to me seemed very difficult because she had extenuating circumstances. This woman had a very severe disability that meant that she would often fall into seizures. And as a result of that, she had the scars on her face, and she needed somebody to watch over her to make sure she didn't hurt herself. She didn't have a large family. The only person she could find was her 19-year-old nephew, and sadly, her 19-year-old nephew was caught with 38 vials of crack cocaine. Well, I was upset with this and angry, and I thought this was an injustice, and I went back to my supervising attorney as a young lawyer myself, and I said to my supervising attorney, I said, this is terrible, we must do something about this. And my supervising attorney said, calm down, Cory, call the housing authority and negotiate with them, see if you can get a settlement offer. And I went to the housing authority and called them up on the phone, and we negotiated, and they faxed me their final offer, which said basically she would be put on a flimsy probation that said if somebody even showed up at her house that she didn't invite, that had even a dime bag full of marijuana, she would be evicted right away, that she would have to give up all of her procedural protections and be barely stabilized in her home and her house. I went back to my supervising attorney, I said, enough of this, we are going to fight this case. And I was full of righteous indignation, and my supervising attorney shook her head and said, Cory, I know you're a smart young man, but I'm telling you, I've seen hundreds of these cases. You barely have a chance of winning, maybe a 10% chance at best. Even if you had Johnny Cochran and the Dream Team, Cory, I'm telling you, you probably have a 10% chance of winning this case. And the other thing is you need to understand is that this is not about you and your agenda for righteousness. This is about an individual and their choices. See, if you force this woman to fight this case and she loses, you will go home devastated, but this woman will not be able to go home at all. You must bring her in and let her choose after you explain to her all of her options. So I drove out to the projects again, and I picked up Miss Gussie Goforth. I put her in my car and drove her to the legal center and put her in a conference room for what was probably one of the longest hours of my life. And it was so long because my parents and my grandparents taught me to revere my elders. But here was this honorable elderly woman who during that entire hour, all she could do was cry her eyes out and say over and over again, why are they doing this to me? I've done nothing wrong. Why are they doing this to me? But then at the end of that hour, something powerful happened. And I am a big believer in miracles. And I think that so many of us don't see them, but we must think that that only which we have within can we see without. If we see no angels, it's because we allow ourselves not to harbor any. And at the end of this hour was a powerful miracle, and it came in the form of a question. As she was crying and I was explaining to her legal ideals and precepts that I barely understood at that point, she suddenly closed her eyes hard for a second and seemed to be as if she was trying to compose herself. And then she put up her hand to stop me from speaking, and I stopped, and she said to me, she said, Mr. Booker, tell me one thing. She said, if we fight this case, will it help other people? And I looked at her, and I said, Ms. Goforth, I think I told you we probably have a 5 or 10% chance of winning this case at best. But if we do win, happily get that long shot win, yes, ma'am, it'll help other people because it'll set a legal precedent, and then she stopped me. She had heard enough. She closed her eyes again, and now she shook from side to side. And suddenly she curled up her fragile fingers into a fist and pounded it onto the table. Her eyes snapped open, and she looked at me hard and firm as if she was possessed by a new spirit of dignity and honor. And then she pushed back her chair, and as my grandfather asked of me, she stood up. And she looked at me hard and she said, 5% is enough for me. We will fight. And then she walked out of the room with an incredible regality. I sat there stunned and turned to look at my supervising attorney who was staring at me, and we just looked at each other for a few minutes saying nothing. And then I realized I had to give the woman a ride home, so I got up and ran after her, put her in my car, drove her back, and I worked so hard for 3 days and 3 nights on this case. I did everything imaginable. I even called Johnny Cochran. He wouldn't return my calls. On the 4th morning, I got a call as I woke up to get ready to go back to the library from my supervising attorney. He said, Cory, I've got some bad news for you, but Miss Gussie Goforth had a heart attack last night and died. I remember slamming down the phone and cussing like a sailor and throwing things around my room, and then I suddenly realized my arrogance. That in my arrogance, I thought that God had put the great Cory Booker there to help the poor Miss Gussie Goforth. But in reality, God had put the great Miss Gussie Goforth there to help the poor Cory Booker. I remember going out to put flowers in front of her door, and there was a woman sweeping up, and the woman looked up at me and said, "You're that lawyer boy, you're Cory Booker, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." She goes, "I don't know what you did for Miss Gussie Goforth, but the last 3 days of her life were the happiest I've ever seen her." Miss Gussie Goforth showed me something powerful, and it is about a force in this world that is the only real force for true transformation. The Greeks called it agape. The Hebrews called it chesed. Me, a young Christian boy from New Jersey, I simply call it love. Love. What this world so desperately needs if we are going to heal ourselves, if we're going to make the rough places smooth, the high places low, to fill in the valleys, to cross the rivers that separate us. So I simply say to you in very simple terms that my grandfather used, in a way that Miss Gussie Goforth showed, I can simply ask you during this day of celebration and adulation, I simply ask you to stand up, because people stood for you. They fought for you. They cried for you. They scrubbed toilets and cleaned floors for you. Stand up, because people you don't even know died for you. They gave their lives on beaches in Normandy. They bled the southern soil red for you under the lash of oppression. Stand up, because this world needs you. It needs your wise words. It needs your powerful praise. It needs your outstanding oratory. Stand up. You were born God's original. Don't die man's copy. This world needs change. You must stand up for it, because it will not roll in on the wheels of inevitability. It will only come in carried on the backs of people willing to stand and bring it in. Stand up, because this world needs you. Your children need you. They need your preparation, your intelligence, your wisdom. They need your love. They need your love. They need your love. Stand up. And when you stand, do not stand so that others look at you in awe. Stand so that you inspire others to stand with you. My dear friends, and I use that word purposefully, you who share my destiny, I ask you to stand up in this world, and may your love transform the globe. Thank you.